So we're going to taste the 2019 Chardonnay. And the Chardonnay is a bit of a new introduction to the St Hugo portfolio because it's only since 2017 that we've produced any whites. So from 2017, we made a Chardonnay and a Riesling from Eden Valley. And then we're going to taste the 2017 Barossa Shiraz, one of our stalwart wines. We've been making that for the last 10 or 12 years. And then we're going to have the private collection Barossa Shiraz, which is part of it. It's a very special part of our portfolio. It's small parcels from either Coonawarra or the Barossa. This wine's from Ebenezer. It's 2012, and this is really nice to present because it's a wine that is in its drinking window now. And
yeah, right.
That's what we do at St Hugo. We try to make wines that will age gracefully, and it's nice to be able to present them when they're actually in a perfect place to drink.
Yeah, fantastic. Peter, I'm going to quickly stop for 2 seconds because I've just realized we had a couple of guys who were viewing on YouTube who had the audio not going through. So I'm going to reverse back for 2 seconds. Sorry to do that to you. I've just got that coming back there. And guys on YouTube, I'll go back for you. And if you're hearing this on the other channels, well, you can hear it twice because it's just as nice. So guys, pretty much I want to introduce myself. My name's Ian Ratcliffe and I'm one of Dave's very good mates. And I'll be kind of going through this as a bit of a host for you on this journey. But more excitingly than having me here, we are absolutely thrilled to have the chief winemaker of St Hugo himself joining us. So Mr. Peter Munro. Pete, thanks again. I've thanked you before, but I don't think I could thank you enough. It's really quite a treat for all of us. Myself as well. As you know, I'm really a massive fan of the brand, and I've been very fortunate that I've had the privilege of tasting lots of different wines over the years. But to come back to St Hugo in the heart of the Barossa, it's one that's really keen to my heart. So, mate, thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. I think we'll have a good fun.
Mate, you were talking about the wines before, and we're going to come back there because I tell you what, I could listen to them all day. But guys, what we're going to do is the whole idea of tonight is to have a lot of fun. It really is about learning about some wines, learning, the behind the scenes kind of stories, and who better to get it from them, the guys who oversee all the winemaking for the brand. So I'm really excited to go through that. Likewise, there's a load of different ways you can interact with us. So jump on the chats, share that in there. I've got a lot of technical Daves that are out there, and they'll come back and let me know what's going on there, and we can run through your questions and really enjoy the evening as we go forward. But we were going through the wines that we're tasting. We've got 3 fantastic wines tonight that we're going through. And Peter, just to loop back, so we're back up to speed, can you run me through them again, starting off with that amazing Chardonnay that we're going to be starting with, mate?
Yeah, so we're going to start with the 2019 Chardonnay. And I was saying that the Chardonnay is only recently been introduced to St Hugo since we started in 2017. Then we're going to try the 2017 Barossa Shiraz. And then we're going to try the 2012 Cellar Collection Barossa Shiraz, which is a small parcel of from the northern area, the Ebenezer of the Barossa. And I was just saying, it's nice. That wine's now 9 years old. It's really nice to be able to show these wines when they're in a lovely drinking window, and that's what we do at St Hugo. We try to make wines that will age gracefully. So it's great to be able to show these wines when they're looking like how we hope to see people enjoy them when we blend them on the bench.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So just quickly, I've just noticed a couple of questions coming through here about the glassware. And that's always a great question to sort of kick off. When we're starting here, I'm assuming we're starting with the Chardonnay. Is that correct?
We are, yeah.
Yeah, and so what sort of glassware should people be looking at to enjoy a Chardonnay? Is there a specific kind of glass that'll help them to taste it in a different way?
Yeah, the glassware is a really interesting thing, and I've done a couple of tastings with Riedel in the past where they've been trying to, going back a little while, trying to generate a Australian Riesling glass, for example. They got a whole heap of winemakers from Australia in the room, and they served all these different Rieslings in different glasses, and we all said which one we liked. And it was really quite fascinating because at the end of half a day of tasting of probably 12 to 14 winemakers, we all pretty much agreed on the same glass over very different wines, and said, well, this is what we think you should use as the basis to make a Australian Riesling glass. So,
yeah, right.
As someone, because it's reasonable, I think, to be bit skeptical and say, well, it's a glass. You put the wine in there, it doesn't really affect it. But it does. It really does.
Yeah, right.
So
how does it affect it? Help me to understand that. I'm an amateur on these things, so I'm really intrigued how that happens.
So I've got my Chardonnay in what is a fairly basic Riedel Chardonnay glass, and you can sort of see how it tapers at the top, and that really focuses the fruit flavors. But there is also other Chardonnay glasses that are much broader and rounder at the top, and they tend to focus the much.
Would it be something like that?
Yes. And so those
I'm glad I've got the right one.
Well, it's interesting because tasting the wine in the two different glasses, you will see a difference. The narrower glass that I've got, you'll probably see more of the fruit flavors come through. The heavier glass, the wider glass, you'll see more of the creamier lees and oak flavors come through. So it makes it a broader, fuller wine. And it's if you've got the ability to look at this wine in two distinctly glasses like that, I think you will see the difference. Yeah,
I'm not going to lie. I did have a chat with Chris Sheehy. So Chris is one of the Pernod team members who teaches me a little bit about the wine glasses. And he said, if you've got Pete, make sure you get two glasses. So I took full advantage of that, and I'm really excited to see the difference on that. So look, we've got these in. Look, at home, guys, this is one of those funny things that, if you have the right glassware or not, it will change what you're doing. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, this wine is that good. It tastes bloody great coming out of those tubes that you've got. So whatever's the best way to go. And I'll throw it over to you, Peter. Could you tell me a little bit, teach me how the best way to go about tasting this? Let me know, run me through the how to smell it, how to taste it, and treat me like I don't know too much about wine, because that's what you're here for, mate, not me.
Yeah, well, I mean, how you go about tasting wine really is up to you. But how I approach it is that, look, you get something out of the nose of a wine. When you smell a wine, you get flavors, you get characters, and that sets the scene. So it's worth having a good smell, seeing what you can see. I mean, everyone says, oh, well, this smells a bit like peaches or apricots or lemons or whatever. Everyone's fruit descriptions are a little bit different. So my peach is your nectarine. Your nectarine is my kumquat or something. So everyone's got their own linguistics about how they go about it and vocabulary. So it's good to have a smell and work on your own vocabulary. So just so you know what you're tasting, and when you try a different wine, you can compare them. So I always have a good smell. I think this, for me personally, I see it as that lovely white to yellow peach kind of character with a nice creamy cashew, leesy sort of character coming through as well. And then put it in your mouth, swirl it around a little bit, let it roll across your tongue, drink it, and just think about it for 10 seconds or so as it goes down, because a really good wine those flavors will hang on your palate. You'll be able to taste it, and as it sort of dissipates, you'll taste slightly different things as well. So it's
For me, it's a really interesting flavor. I think it's one of those things, and I mean, I feel strange saying this to you, but when I think of Chardonnay, I think of what my mum used to drink back in the 70s, right? Literally, that's where my default almost goes back to. But when I taste this, it's nothing like what I remember mum drinking back in the day. Maybe it's because I've got a bit of age on myself now, but to me, I really get that creamy flavor, and it's interesting, and that the way you describe that cashewy flavor, that's really quite an interesting flavor to me that I get out of that.
Yeah, I think Australia has done amazing things for Chardonnay, and St Hugo, I think, was making some great Chardonnays, but in general, the Australian industry is making amazing Chardonnays. So if you go back to when your mum was drinking Chardonnays, they were pretty full, pretty fat, had lots of flavour, lots of alcohol. Then the Australian industry sort of went to this point where, oh no, we want to make serious wines, and everyone had made these really lean, citrusy, elegant wines that had no flavour. And look, I'll put my hand up. I did that too. And then now I think the pendulum swung back again, and we're just in this lovely balance of getting, in this one, for example, I think really nice citrus flavors with those white, yellow, peach characters, and nice subtle use of oak. So it all comes together. So you get elegance and class coming through, but without the overblown alcohol or fruit. It's a lovely seamless character. So yeah, I think that sort of ties together nicely in this wine.
Yeah, great. And so this wine that you're making, whereabouts do you guys grow this?
Yeah, so this is from Eden Valley. So St Hugo, we're based out of, all our grapes come out of Coonawarra and the Barossa. So the Barossa, you've got the valley floor, which is pretty much where all the reds live. It's a bit warm for Chardonnay and Riesling. So up in Eden Valley, you're talking much higher altitude. We're sort of up to 450, 500 meters above sea level. Much cooler, especially at night. And that's what you want with the whites, because you want them to retain their acidity and retain those fresh, vibrant fruit characters. And so there's Eden Valley, part of the Barossa, but the coolest, highest part of the Barossa.
Yeah, right. And so what sort of elevation do they get down there? Well, sorry, I should say down there because we're in Sydney, but it might be higher than where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, so the Barossa, the lowest part of the Barossa is about 170 meters, and the highest part of Eden Valley gets up to about 620 meters above sea level. So quite significantly high. Yeah.
I really would not have get that at all. You know, it's for me, you know, because I actually live in the Blue Mountains of Sydney. And when you start talking about that height, we're talking about like Wentworth Falls, Katoomba Way, which is, in my mind, quite high. So that's really interesting to understand that. Yeah, great. Yeah, interesting. Look, I've just got a really interesting question that just came through here from Art M. And they've asked, when do you need to decant a wine, and do you really need to? And it's all, I know a little bit about the reds, but whites, do we decant whites or anything like that?
Yeah, you can decant whites. I mean, a decanting will really just open up the wine. So sometimes if a wine's very young and it's really tightly wound, I mean, St Hugo is a good example because we make wines to age. So to do that, you don't want them to be really opulent and expressive in their youth. So if you've got one of those wines, and I think this Chardonnay would be a good wine where you could decant it, it just opens it up. The fruit comes out, and the other, it gets a bit of air into the wine and just it makes those fruit characters come out. I think you can decant just about any wine, but the wines that'll get the most benefit out of it are those wines that are pretty muted when you first smell them.
That's an interesting concept. And so for you, how long have you been making wine for? I'm interested in that question. Or should that to give away your age, mate?
I'm going to sound pretty old. I've been making wine for 25 years.
Yeah, fantastic. And so for you, and this is an interesting thought sort of off this particular wine, but do you have a preference of wine you like to make? Is that something that happens?
Oh, yes, it is. Yeah. I love making Chardonnay. I do love making Chardonnay, because if you think about, say, I'll use Riesling as a counterbalance. Riesling, you go out into the vineyard, you try capture what's in the vineyard, and you don't do much in the winery. You really just want to capture everything, which is a lot harder than it might sound. But with Chardonnay, you get all the box and dice out. You throw all the winemaking tricks at it with oak, with malo, with lees, with skin contact, all these types of things. So it is a fun wine to make because you can push it in lots of different directions.
Yeah, right. That's fantastic. It's one of those things that, you know, there's so much that goes into winemaking. And I think for me, you know, we call it, you know, I hear a wine being called a Chardonnay, and yet there's such diversity in the flavor of that one grape that comes out. So I'm assuming that comes back to the winemaker, yeah?
Yeah, I think it comes back to two things. It comes back to where it's grown, and because you got to remember these are plants, these are vines, they're growing in soil, and they do really take on the characteristics of where they're grown. So it's that, and then it's the winemaker and where you push that in terms of style. So they're the two main factors that derive the wine you get in your glass at the end.
Yeah, fantastic. That's what we've actually leads into another question that's just popped up here, and they've just asked on the Chardonnays. how do vintages differ year to year? And in that, do you have any tips on some great years to look out for when buying perhaps like a Chardonnay like this?
Yep. Vintage obviously makes a difference because it's the weather, and that's one of the great things about being a winemaker, is that you can't just do the same thing every year. You've got to adapt to what the weather and that how that affects the grapes. Look, generally with Chardonnay, the cooler years are the better years. If you go back to the 2017 was probably a classic year. And then the vintage we've just had, 2021, which I think you'll see some. We're really, really happy with our Chardonnay out of 2021. Right. But then, and they're probably two exceptional years. And I think that 2019 we're drinking now is a very good year. So
yeah, right. That's an interesting thing. So can you, when someone's coming out, like so the 21 that you just talked about, so this one we've got now is a 2019, did you say?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, great. And so with that, when we start to look at like a 21, when will you release that? When will that be good to go to market?
Sort of the middle of about 12 months from now. Yeah.
So it'll fantastic.
We'll pick that in March this year. It'll spend the best part of 9 to 10 months in barrel. We'll blend it either just before or just after Christmas, and then we'll get it ready and we'll bottle it in February-ish, and it'll be ready to be out in the market in June-ish next year.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'll be keeping my eye out for the 21 in that case from that tip that you just told me.
Yeah, it's a little tip.
That's great. And the other question that's just popped up here as well is, when you're looking at that, if I was to buy the 21, how long could I sell all that for? Is it best for drinking straight away?
Look, that's where I think Australian Chardonnay and the St Hugo Chardonnay is a good example, is that these wines will age really quite nicely for 5 to 8 years. I mean, occasionally you'll get wines that will age longer. And so, like, for example, the 2017 Chardonnay from St Hugo, I think will be a lovely wine at 10 to 12 to 15 years of age. But for me personally, I do like to drink the St Hugo Chardonnay at about 4 to 6 years of age. Just gives it a little bit more complexity than that fresh, vibrant fruit you get on release that we're seeing in this 19. If you give it 3 or 4 more years, it really becomes a little bit more interesting for me. But it's a very much a personal preference. If you like older wines, you'll drink them older. If you like that fresh, vibrant character, by all means, drink them younger. Yeah.
And look, I'll be completely honest. There's a discipline that takes to cellaring wine that means when I sit at home, sometimes I don't want to pop it out of the back and grab it out of the fridge.
If you can teach me that discipline, that would be great as well.
Yeah, because I don't have it. It's a learning progress, mate.
Neither do I.
Mate, that's fantastic. Well, look, that's an awesome one to do. Look, should we jump onto the Shiraz? Do you think is it time to give that a try now?
Absolutely.
So great. Of course. So, guys, the ones we're going to jump onto next, you'll have 2 reds in your packs or the bottles. We're going to move to the 2017 Shiraz. So, I do happen to be very fortunate to have a bottle with me. I will be drinking it responsibly, as all good Daves do. But I'll pour a glass for that. And so, glassware on this, Peter, what should we be looking for in something like this?
So, this is Barossa Shiraz. Generally, Barossa Shiraz have a lot of flavour. They're quite generous in fruit flavour. And what we at St Hugo sort of go into, we try to embrace that and then try to pull it back together and harmonise it instead of making it too big. If you look at a St Hugo Shiraz, they're a fairly elegant version of Barossa Shiraz, but there's still a lot of flavour there. So if you compare, if I compare my Chardonnay glass to my Shiraz glass, I've got a pretty big glass. It's got a pretty wide opening, and that is good for Barossa Shiraz because you have all these big flavors. You don't need to narrow the small amount of flavor. You've got a big lot of flavor, so you can have a big wide glass and it lets it all come out.
Yeah, great, fantastic. I'm excited about this one. I'm going to let you on a little secret. This is actually my favorite Shiraz that comes out.
We need people like you.
Mate, don't worry. I'm drumming the St Hugo drum too often, but it's a great thing. I must admit, one of the little comments that came out, less a question, and they actually, I think it was Zachary mentioned, he said, as soon as lockdown's finished in Sydney, we've got to organise a St Hugo dinner out. And I said, I tell you what, mate, I will be there with bells on. So
Yeah.
all to come, all to come. So look, as we go, we're going to jump into this one. There's a quick one. People are blowing up in the chat that I'm just having a look at about the DR3, which I know is a very popular brand that's pushing through at the moment. So the question that's been asked, I'm going to ask you a very specific one about the Daniel Ricciardo's number 3, and that was actually they bought a 2014 of the DR3. How long can they sell her it for, or should they drink it now?
Well, it really comes down to their self-control. But, the 14, I think, what I like about the DR3 is it's a relatively plush wine for the 14s. I would say that its optimal drinking time is sort of 10 to 12 years. I think it'll drink lovely after that. If it was me personally, I'd be sort of looking at that 10 to 12 years of age. So yeah, you have to hold it for a little bit longer, but I think it is quite opulent at the moment, but give it a few more years before you crack it open.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, mate, let's go back to my little favourite that I've got here. So talk me through this one, if you could, please.
Yeah, so this is the 17 St Hugo Barossa Shiraz. So we're really lucky in the Barossa. We get to source from vineyards all the way up the Barossa. Now, if you think of the Barossa, it's about 30, 35 kilometres long and about 10 kilometres wide. And the grapes you get from the south are very different from the grapes you get from the north. And from the south, you tend to get lovely red fruited, bright, fresh fruit characters. And as you go north, the soil gets a lot tougher. It gets a lot harder to grow grapes. So you get much more tannic, dark, black, graphite-y, mineral-y characters. And what we try to do with this wine is balance out the two between the north and the south. So we want those fresh, vibrant floral characters, which I think the 17 really shows a lot of. But we also want that tannin and structure that we get from the north, which is the graphite, minerally blackness, because that's the structure that makes these wines age lovely, gracefully, nicely for 10, 15 years. So we have all these parcels from all over the valley. We keep them all separate, and then after about 15 months, we bring them all in and we look at them on the bench and we decide which one goes in, both for quality and also for stylistically what goes together. So, which is a very fun day, to be honest, because it's a big day, but it's a fun day.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, I think we could do it. We won't do it tonight, but there could be an entire session on what it's like to be a winemaker. Like, it's one of these roles that I'm just like, what you guys get up to is, I find it absolutely just so foreign for someone who works in an office in the city. You know what I mean? So for me to hear these things that you're doing and overseeing, it's really exciting. So I suppose when you're talking about that, I mean, how much wine is St Hugo producing?
Oh, St Hugo, we probably crushing in the vicinity of 2,000 to 3,000 tonne. Oh, maybe 2. I don't know. Off the top of my head, I don't know. 2,000 tonne. That's a lot of wine. It's not insignificant. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And so with this 2017 that we're tasting now, what sort of breakdown on years should I be selling this for? Same sort of thing as sort of 10 to 15 sort of years?
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously St Hugo is we're very known for our Coonawarra Cabernet and the Barossa Shiraz. I really like to drink the Coonawarra Cabernets as an older wine, definitely 10 to 12 years of age. I think they need that time to really come into their own. The Shiraz, just my personal preference, I prefer to drink Shiraz a little bit younger. So, more in that 6 to 8 year sort of period, but they will look really good going to 10 to 15. It's just that you get such opulent fruit with Shiraz that it's that yumminess that I actually quite like that as a younger wine because, it has this moorishness about it. So that's my opinion. But as I said, it comes down to the taste and what you like to drink. And if you like those more complex flavors and less primary fruit, by all means, this wine will look good in 10 to 12 to 15 years.
Yeah, and again, it's that discipline thing. I've got a fridge and it's got a lock on it, but I keep finding the key, so it doesn't really work for me in that regard. Mate, it's interesting. You mentioned a while ago, not a while ago, a few moments ago, I should say, the Cab Sav. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but the guys in your team have actually organized an amazing deal for the guys at home. If you want to get a hold of this, we've actually got the Magnum, so 1.5 liters of the 2007 Cab Sav. So, I mean, we've spoken about that wine before. Can you just tell me a bit about that? Because I don't have any to taste, but what is that wine and how is it that we can get a Magnum of that? Because that sounds pretty exciting to me.
Yeah, no, and this is the great thing is that this is now that's 14 years old. This is in its drinking window. I really like the 17 Coonawarra Cabernet because it's a more elegant, in the more elegant spectrum of where St Hugo Cabernet is. We always talk about power and elegance, and vintage sort of affects that. Some of the vintages are a little bit more powerful, some are a little bit more elegant. The 17 is a more elegant Coonawarra Cabernet, and now at that 14 years, it's just drinking beautifully. It's the tannins have softened. You've still got this lovely bay leaf herbal character coming through, but it isn't all about primary fruit. It's in a more mature sort of spectrum, and it will under a Magnum. It's going to look younger and fresher and brighter. So it's a I have a glass here. I just have.
So I'm a little bit envious now. Tell me about it. Talk me through it.
But whereas as a young Coonawarra Cabernet, St Hugo often has these really bright floral violet characters and blueberries and very blue fruit characters that are floral and lifted, but then this underlying Cabernet bay leaf. Slightly herbal characters, which we like because that's what Cabernet gives us. We don't want it to be a big dry red wine. We want it to look like Cabernet. And all those characters all sort of melded in nicely together now, and you got this lovely briary undertone, but sweet fruit on the palate. So
it's
a nice thing to be able to sell these wines because you can buy them now and drink them tomorrow, and they're what the winemaker was thinking. 14 years ago, this is what I'm trying to put together to make and to let people enjoy.
So how long have you been with St Hugo for now?
3 years.
Fantastic. And so when you go back and you look at something like the 07 that we're talking about here, I mean, do you get to go back and sort of taste the different wines? I mean, do you still talk to the winemakers who made them? I mean, how does that sort of work?
Yeah, we do. We go through the museum. We've got all the wines from St Hugo going back to the first one in 1980, and we go through them all once a year, and we taste them. We talk about them. We do bring in the winemakers that have made those wines over the last 41 years, and that is really interesting because there's always stories that go on with why a wine looks the way it does, whether it be the vintage or whatever happened in the winery that year, and so we've got a really good record of the wines we've made. We taste them regularly. We've got the stories behind them, and we've also been quite fortunate to keep some of these wines back, like the 2007 that you've got in Magnums, and we've been quite lucky that we've bottled a fair bit of stuff in large format because if you do want to age wine and you want to age it over a longer period of time, the bigger the bottle, the better, really. And so if the Magnums will look better than the 750s of the same wine. Yeah, if they're stored under the same conditions.
That's really interesting because I tell you what, this is the one that I absolutely love because when you get past the Magnum, you go into and I'm going to get these wrong, so bear with me. You've got Methuselahs, Neverbohums. Is that the correct term? I mean,
Nebuchadnezzars.
I mean, you can Nebuchadnezzars. They're the ones. Yeah. And I mean, you can get wine in bottles. I didn't realize this up to I think 6 or 7 liters. Is that correct?
I think you can actually, and they're the champagne names for the big bottles. So you go with a 3 liters of Jeroboam and a 6 liters of Methuselah, and then a 9 liters of Nebuchadnezzar. But you can get an 18 liter, which I have no idea what you call it. But
I think you call it massive. I think it's
I think you call it a very big party.
Yeah. You need to invite a few friends for that one. That'd be amazing. But I
Yeah,
suppose that makes sense because you've got the volume of liquid, which really helps retain the quality as opposed to anything else. And that
yeah.
makes a lot of sense. So I tell you what, guys, if you want to get a hold of the '07, it's on the Drinks with Dave page. Tech Days, pop the link up somewhere for me if you could. But I think that's a great little one that's ready to drink now. But likewise, the 2017 that we've got with us now. I actually do have a couple of those put away. I actually have for my birthday last year, very kindly, a friend bought me a case of the 2016, and I managed to put half of it in a fridge. So we'll be good to
Well,
go on that one.
hopefully you don't know where the key is.
No, this is one of those things. I think I need to start dropping it at my parents' house, but I'm pretty sure my dad would drink it. So what can we do either way? But look, really, really interesting one there. A couple of questions, guys. If you've got any other questions, pop them in now, and I'm more than happy to ask Peter. But one that I've actually seen pop up 3 times now, Peter. Everyone's asking, "What's your favorite wine?"
Uh it changes. I think wine is used for an occasion. So I think I really liked the St Hugo GSM, the Grenache Shiraz Mourvedre, because of its plushness, its lusciousness, its approachability. But then again, there's nothing better than tasting the St Hugo Cabernet as an older wine. I think that they're probably the most enjoyable wines I like out of the St Hugo portfolio. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And so, before you were working at St Hugo, where were you working? In which vineyard were you working before that?
I made Leo Buring for many, many years. So
Really? Yeah, right.
so
And so
lots of reasons.
what was it? Yeah, fantastic. I can imagine. That's incredible. So for you coming across to St Hugo, and St Hugo has such an interesting story, which we'll talk about in a moment. But what's been the real key for you as chief winemaker? What are you trying to achieve with the brand, and what are you trying to move forward with the different flavors?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to narrow down. It's a little bit boring, but it's the geeky winemaker in me. But it's making sure the right blocks are going to the right spot. So we've got lots of different blocks. We get fruit off both from vineyards we own as a company, but also growers we've dealt with for many, many years. And so it's about treating each of those blocks separately, individually and separately and differently through the whole winemaking process to sort of optimize each block, I think is the key. Really good winemaking is really just about fine detail and getting all that fine detail right. So then one of our objectives is to branch out some of the St Hugo portfolio into some of these sub-regional wines where we are looking not just at a combination of a region, but also the interesting sub-regions that lie within the Barossa and also Coonawarra, and sort of showcase those characteristics as well.
That's fantastic. And so from a practical kind of point of view, obviously you have blocks, as you were referring to, of grapes that that St Hugo owns themselves. But when you're going out and looking for different different parcels of grapes, how do you do that? Out of curiosity, is there like a number you call, or is there a market that you go to? How do you sort of find these grapes?
Oh, well, for example, in the Barossa, I mean, most of the vineyards are owned by growers who sell to various different people. And, the wine industry is it's a small community. So you're pretty aware of what grapes are where, who's a good, who's a not so good, and also where they sit in the valley and what sort of soil they're on. So you've got a bit of a start to know where to start looking and who to start talking to. But a lot of the growers that we deal with, we've dealt with over a very long period of time, because growing grapes is not a yearly, an annual sort of thing when it comes to quality. To get the quality, you really need to be thinking 4 or 5 years ahead to make sure you're treating your vineyard correctly. And so that's why most of our growers are long-term people, because we have this relationship, so we have a clear understanding of what we want to get off the vineyard every year.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And because you're based in the Barossa, have you lived down there for a long time? Is it just sort of like as a winemaker, you just live in the Barossa, or have you moved around a bit yourself?
I've lived in the Barossa for the last 20 years, with 3 years away for a while. I lived in New Zealand for 3 years, so I've lived in the Barossa for the last 20 years. But before that, as a young winemaker, I did move around a lot, and that's pretty standard. It's a bit of an apprenticeship, and the more experience and the diversity of experience you get, the diversity of people you work with, I think stands you in good stead about challenging ideas, creating new ideas, and forming a good basis for your philosophy as a winemaker.
Yeah, fantastic. And so the Barossa as a region, obviously 20 years there. What is it that you like about the region as a winemaker?
There's a lot of, and I think it's one of the things that the Barossa probably doesn't get enough credit for, is there's a lot of diversity in the Barossa. People think of Barossa Shiraz. Everything is fairly big reds. That's what they are. Whereas there's a lot of diversity. You've obviously got hills running down the middle of it. So you've got Eden Valley on one side and the Barossa Valley on the other side. So those hills create a lot of different sub-regions, I suppose. And the soil across, we're talking about dirt, but I find it interesting. But the soil across the Barossa is very varied, and that makes a massive difference to the style of wines that you can actually produce. So that diversity is very interesting for me, and it allows you to make a wide variety of wines.
Yeah, great. That's interesting. I suppose, and this leads into a question that's just popped up. Obviously the collaboration you've done with Daniel Ricciardo for DR3. I mean, how does that come about? How does a Formula One driver sort of turn around and go, "Hey guys, let's make a wine"?
He just rang me up. Yeah.
Yes, your mates were at F1. We're back in the paddock.
It kind of did start that way because St Hugo is the official wine sponsor for the Australian Formula One. So in 2019, was the first year, and we were there, and we were the official wine sponsor. And through various mechanisms, we got talking to Daniel. He's very genuinely interested in wine, wants to learn more about wine, knows a bit about wine, has a good family connection to wine, and he just wants to go on a wine journey where he is more educated, more understanding of wine. And so that sort of came about that way, and then we released the DR3 at the start of in March this year.
To rave reviews all round. Literally, from my understanding, I think it's pretty much sold out around Australia. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think there might be. Cabernet's definitely sold out. There might be a smidgen of Shiraz left. I'm not sure, but there's not very much.
Yeah, quite incredible.
Yeah, so we're going to keep on working with Daniel. I've got it would be great if he could come back to Australia, and I know that he, on my conversations with him, would love to come back to Australia for a break and a holiday. But we've got a tasting session with him in the next, I think it's in the next 4 or 5 weeks, where he'll be in LA in the break of the F1 season, and we're sending him a lot of different components of the next DR3, and so we'll do this kind of thing over the teams and work out the next DR3 release.
Fantastic. Yeah, great. That's really exciting, and I love the story that goes with it, that comes through. Like when I first heard about it, I'll be honest, I was like, I don't know Daniel Ricciardo from a bar of soap that I see on TV, but I thought, what the hell is this guy got to do with it? And then learning about the story and tasting the wine, it's fantastic. My hat goes off to you guys. Honestly, you really knocked that out of the park. So well done in that regard. And it's a great drop, guys. Unfortunately, literally most of it's sold out. But the good news is there's plenty of St Hugo of other varietals that you can get your hands on. So make sure you do that. Look, we talked about that before a little bit. The name St Hugo, I know it's got quite a special a meaning to the entire organization. And you mentioned that the first bottle was in 1980. Did you say?
Yeah. So 1980 was the beginning of St Hugo, but it pretty much started a long way before that, because Colin Gramp, who was one of the a very influential winemaker in the Barossa, his father was Hugo Gramp, and back in the early 20th century, he was running the Gramp Orlando winery, and it was going very successfully. And then, unfortunately, in 1938, he died in a plane crash with a couple of other significant people in the Australian wine industry. So when Colin was only, I think he was 15 or 16 at the time, and so over many years, Colin went on his own winemaking journey, and he too became the managing director of Orlando / Gramps, and he wanted to create a brand and a wine that was in a legacy to his father. So that was the beginning of the idea for St Hugo, and in 1980 they created the first wine, and it was the only wine for St Hugo for the first 30 years. It was a St Hugo Coonawarra Cabernet, and that was about picking a wine that was of extremely good quality and would age gracefully over many years as an honour to his father. So that's why for the first 30 years, St Hugo was just that one wine. And obviously for us, that legacy, and I know I feel that sort of weight of history every time we blend the St Hugo Cabernet, is that this is the one wine. This is the most important wine we make every year. Not saying that the others aren't important, but the history of that wine is very pertinent to the whole Australian wine industry.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I haven't heard it like that. That's pretty special when you think of it in that regard, that it's really a wine made to honor his dad. So that's crazy. And so bearing that in mind, I mean, I never know where to go with that. That's such a powerful message. When you're looking at the wines and moving forward, do you think the portfolio of St Hugo will increase with what you're putting out there with the different SKUs, or do you think you'll keep it kind of in the lane that it's in now and keep pushing it forward and driving that quality of wine?
Yeah, I think for me, I sort of think of St Hugo with Coonawarra being the heart and soul of St Hugo, because that's where the idea started. That's where it all started, and then the Barossa is our home. So from those two regions, we want to create great wines, and it does. Barossa Shiraz, Coonawarra Cabernet, and then also the Chardonnay and the Riesling. But we will expand out into highlighting the nuances of those regions more by creating sub-regional wines and single vineyard wines that sort of stretch the boundaries of the St Hugo style a little bit, because when you're talking about a sub-regional or a single vineyard wine, you really want that essentially that dirt, that little parcel of land to shine through as well within the context of what we try to do at St Hugo, which is more elegance when it comes to how we approach making our wines.
Yeah, great. Because is it and correct me if I'm wrong, and I apologize in advance. Is it power and elegance? Is that the motto of St Hugo? Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. And to me, there's lots of marketing that goes on, but in terms of, I actually really like that, because we deal with Barossa Shiraz, for example. We deal with a very powerful fruit-driven grape variety from a pretty powerful grape growing region. But if you look at the St Hugo wines against all its competitor set and so forth, we really do make more elegant versions of the same type of wines. So that elegance and that fineness is very much front of center when we're looking at the whole winemaking process. So, and for me, the vintage sort of kind of dictates a little bit how powerful a wine is from one given year to how elegant a wine is to another given year. And we try to be in the middle, but you've got to take with what nature gives you a little bit as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. Look, mate, I think we should start moving towards the piste de resistance, as they say, and what are the best wines out. But before we jump onto the 2012, we've just had a question that's come out there. That's a question from Zachary, who says he's 25 years old, and as a younger person getting into wine, do you have any tips for him?
Getting into drinking wine or getting into making wine?
I'm assuming he's getting into drinking wine, but hey, maybe making. So let's go with drinking.
I think, and I would say this too anyway, I mean, have an open mind. I mean, try lots of different things. The different grape varieties is a good starting point to sort of understand what you like. So try some Rieslings, try some Chardonnays, try some Sauvignon Blancs, try some Shiraz Cabernets, or any different variety. Now, that won't be what that variety will always look like, but it's a good starting point to say, well, I do like those really floral characters you get out of Sauv Blanc, or I do like those creamy, rich characters you can get out of Chardonnay. I like those plush, more opulent characters you get out of Shiraz, as opposed to the more structural, tannic characters you get out of Cabernet. So it's a nice reference point to start tasting those, and just for yourself to go, well, because if you're speaking to other people in bottle shops and saying, well, what do you recommend? It does point you in some sort of direction. But, if you're 25 and getting into wine, you've got an expensive hobby coming ahead for you. Yeah.
But an enjoyable one nonetheless.
Yeah, but a very enjoyable one.
I think one of the things that, again, certainly from myself, who I'm far from a wine expert, that I would say to you, Zachary, as well, mate, is don't be afraid to try different varietals, because that's something for me personally. I'd find myself, I'd walk into a bottle shop and sometimes I just look around and I'm like, there's just so much wine. I don't know where to look. And perhaps I'd ask someone who works there. But by default, I generally just walk over to the section and be like, okay, I'm buying a Shiraz, or I'm buying a Cab, or I'm buying, a Riesling, or whatever it might be. One of the best things that I've really been fortunate enough to do is to have people like you, Peter, turn around and say, mate, just try something different. And I found it really interesting that there's such a difference in flavor of the wines across the different varietals, regions, and everything that comes with it.
Yeah. And that's because their plants grown in different places and they give you different characteristics.
Correct. And that's the craziest thing that comes back to it. So look, as we do that, let's jump in, guys. If you haven't opened it already, I do have a nice little tube for myself here. I'm not opening the bottle because I'm not going to drink it all myself. So I'll be enjoying the tube tonight. But let's pour out this 2012 and have a little taste and see how we go, if that's all right with you, Pete.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I should have opened it up earlier, I believe. But it still smells bloody good.
Yeah, and this wine's actually from, it doesn't say it on the label, but it's actually from the northern Ebenezer sub-region of the Barossa. So it's in that area of the Barossa where you got very thin soils. It's all grown over like an ironstone, lot of soil, and it gives you these dark, rich, plush, almost characteristics. And as it's aging, you get those sort of small goodsy, what do I say? Sort of complexing characters become rounded and soft. It's an interesting and complex sort of nose, but it's very generous and plush as well. It's a good example of a wine that doesn't have those fresh, vibrant red fruit characters anymore, but it's got the same power and depth to it. It's just moved on to something a little bit more complex and a bit softer too, because those tannins have softened over the 9 years that it's been since it's been made. It's a good wine. It's a wine. It's in a nice drinking spot.
Yeah, I really like that. So, I mean, for me, I love just drinking a wine like this by itself. But at the same token, if we're talking about different foods and things like that would complement this, do you have any recommendations or things that might come along really well that would go with something with a wine that really is as developed as this?
Yeah, this wine is probably the perfect wine for what the weather in the Barossa is tonight. It's cold. It's pretty dark and windy and raining, and a nice, warm, hearty type of dish for me would really go well with this. So you can have fairly strong meat type flavors and a rich sauce, and it's still got the depth of power to overcome that and match with that. And it's got freshness that'll cut through sort of fatty characters like lamb and so forth. So yeah, it's looking pretty nice actually.
It's one of those ones that occasionally I just have a wine. I'm like, mate, that's just really nice, really nice. And so as we go through this, at 2012, obviously it's delicious now, as everyone at home can probably taste. And I look at something like this. I'm a big fan of this wine, and I probably sound like I'm a bit of a bogan, and in truth be told, I am. Don't let the jacket trick you. But something like this, having a barbecue, a bit of lamb on the barbie, couple of sausages, and a really nice afternoon out the back. Yes, the cold weather, I get it, but I tell you what, a barbecue on this would go bloody well, I think.
Yeah, you probably go to more gourmet barbecues than me then, but yes.
Hey, I didn't say I was bringing the wine.
Yeah.
But it's a great drop that comes out there. So when we're doing a wine like this, is it worth, if I've got a bottle of this around, is it worth cellaring past this point, or is it really at the ideal spot right now?
Yeah, I don't think, good wines to me, they get to a point where they have these lovely age characters and then they hold it for quite a long time. And
Right.
I think this is in this very good plateau stage. And I think if you tried this wine in 4 to 5 years' time, it won't have changed very much. Then maybe 5 years after that, it will start to become a little bit more developed. But I think you could be pretty confident that this wine would look fresh, like it does now, rich and generous for the next 5 years.
Yeah,
And
right.
this is where I was sort of saying, I like to drink my Shiraz about this age.
Yeah.
So because it's still got a little bit of that fresh fruit character, but it's got softness and it's got a bit of complexity. So it's up to everyone's personal preferences. Don't feel if you've got it, don't feel you need to drink it. I think you've got a good 5 years and probably longer.
Yeah, great. That's interesting. Another question that I've just seen pop up here is people talk about cellaring these, and we've been talking about before, and I know I mentioned my fridge, but when we talk about ideal cellaring, obviously not on top of someone's fridge is the top tip. But I mean, what should we be doing with a bottle? And for people at home that perhaps don't have a wine cellar in their house or anything like that, do you have any tips on cellaring?
Yeah, I mean, ideally you want to keep them at a cool temperature, it's at 14, 16 degrees. If you can't do that, you're much better off keeping them at an even temperature. So you're much better off keeping, say, your wines at, if you're in Sydney and it's going to be 18, 20 degrees, if it stays at 18, 20 degrees all the time, that's much better than being 20, 22, 14, back to 24. That variation in temperature isn't as good for wine. So find somewhere that's consistent, in the dark, and also lose the key so you don't go and steal them.
No, I think it's a wise tip. And I tell you what, a shameless plug, but if you keep your eye out, guys, Aldi, they do these great little fridges. I think they're like $250. Well worth it. I've got a couple of them there. If you want to get right out there, you can buy the Vintex that I think go for about $2,000 a fridge. But the Aldi ones do a pretty good job, I've got to say, if you look at it that way as well. Look, we've got this one coming through, and this is the thing that comes through. I mean, I tell you what, I'm reading these questions that are coming through. They're coming through a little bit thick and fast, as we said. I like this one that just picked my eye out, Pete. The question is, fun question. Peter, if you, let's just say, we won't go into the details of it. If it was your last meal, we'll leave the electric chair out of it. What wine and what meal would you have?
Oh, gee, it's
a good question, right?
That's tough. I think I would have to go it's a great, I mean, some of the best ones I've ever had have been white Burgundies, like white Chardonnays from France, and a very, very good white Burgundy would be up there for me. And surprisingly, my favorite food pairing that just goes so well together is roast chicken and Chardonnay. And we're lucky we've got an outdoor oven at our place, and we often on a Sunday cook in it. And if we do a roast chook in some way, shape or form with, like I said, a 5-6-year-old Chardonnay, that is one of my favorite pairings of wine and food. And it's I tell you what, it's pretty rustic as well.
Yeah, I tell you what, I've never had that before, but that's going to go to the top of my list. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Very nice,
So,
very nice. There's the question. There's the question, guys. Answered for you. And not what I was expecting, but what a great little tip. And I'll be doing that for sure. Roast chicken's always good. Let's be honest with you. It's a great bloody drop.
Yeah.
So that goes through. Guys, look, that's it's a great little drop, and there's so many notes coming through. The other great thing that I look there, and look, I've got to say a very special thank you to you guys down at St Hugo who've opened up, some amazing wines for us to taste tonight. I know that cellar collection, that 2012, you can't buy that anywhere apart from the cellar door. So very much appreciate that. But I also know you have a label. Is it the private collection? How does that work? The private and also, the breakdown that comes through.
Yeah, so the private collection, which you can get through the cellar door and online through the cellar door, is it's really showcasing these sub-regional parts of it's mainly the Barossa, but also Coonawarra. But trying to highlight those sub-regional characters, because we get all these amazing parcels and we keep them all separate, and we're trying, when they really shine. And they're not always the same wines. They could be different vineyards. They could be different parts for different parts of the Barossa. But when they really shine, we, as winemakers, feel an obligation to get them into bottles so that people can appreciate them and share them at a later date, as opposed to being blended with something else and being adulterated. So we as a winemaking group fight quite hard to get these wines into bottle, because they're a good exceptional expression of where they come from.
Yeah, great. So I know one of the great things, we've also been really fortunate, and thank you, to have access to the 2018 Grenache of the private collection. Can you tell me a bit about that if the guys at home want to buy that?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say it's a one-off wine. It's been a one-off wine, but we have some amazing vineyards of Grenache, and we use it for our GSM. And Grenache is a hidden gem of the Barossa, because everyone knows the Barossa for Shiraz, but there is some absolutely amazing parcels of really old Grenache in the Barossa. And we got this one vineyard that it's either 60 or 70 years old, but it could be 85. We just don't know, because the records don't go quite back that far. But so let's say it's 70 to 80 years old. And in a great vintage like 2018 we found a very small parcel that we just went, that's too good just to go with the other stuff. It's so interesting and unique. We want to bottle a very small parcel off, and that's where the 18 private collection Grenache came from. And we haven't made it since.
Wow.
There's a possibility we might make it out of 21, because it's been a cracking vintage, but in the interim period we haven't made it, because it really is just something that it's us sort of saying, well, this is really cool, this is really interesting. I think someone else should be able to drink this apart from us as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. So guys, if you want to get a hold of that 2018 Grenache, jump on and tech Dave, if you can pop that out so everyone can get a hold of that, that'd be great. One of the questions that just popped up as well, Peter, is, with a Grenache, what sort of food pairing would you put with that?
A lot of earthy characters. Beetroot goes extremely well with Grenache, and those more legumes, like earthy legumes, go really, really well, and even some pulses and those sort of things go fantastically well with Grenache, because it is a sort of an earthy character. And at the restaurant at St Hugo, that's what they tend to match them with. I mean, I hate Brussels sprouts, but apparently Brussels sprouts go very well with Grenache as well.
Mate, I'm one of those crazy guys. I like Brussels sprouts. I didn't as a kid, but I've become a bit of a fan. That'll go through. That's fantastic. You can
get some Grenache and see if it works.
Mate, look, I'm in. Any excuse, and that's the only reason I'm going to be drinking the Grenache, just to match my my spuds, of course. So look, that's a great one there. Look, a couple of questions that are popping up before we finish up, guys. If you've got any other questions, let me know. Alea, I can see your one there. I do apologize. She's just quickly said, what would you match with the 2012 Shiraz? What sort of food would you put up with that one, mate?
Well, I think something rich and generous, something hearty. Yeah, food matching.
Very nice.
Food matching maybe is not my best skill.
Mate, how about you just keep making great wines and we'll drink it, and we'll leave the food up to the chefs. One other question I've got to ask. What in the next 5 to 10 years, if we're going to be tasting some St Hugo wine, what should we be looking forward to, and what should we be expecting from the brand?
I think we hopefully will be expanding out to some of the cooler climate versions of Barossa and Coonawarra. We're looking at some what would be called alternate or different varieties into those regions, and trying to see if we can get those up to speed to a quality where we can think they're good enough for St Hugo. So it's a long game, but we think it's important to keep ahead of the game.
Yeah, fantastic. And so the brand St Hugo is that the sort of like the pinnacle of the portfolio at Pernod Ricard?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the premium brands in Pernod Ricard, and we're very fortunate that we get a pick of some of the best fruit in the company. So yeah,
that's fantastic. That's got to be a win. And look, not a bad job to have, mate.
Yes, it's not too bad.
Yeah, I'll cop it on the chin. Look, mate. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate you taking the time out of down in the cold there in the Barossa tonight. But guys, again at home, if there's any of these wines you want to grab, jump online, take a hold of those. It's been an absolute privilege having Pete with us tonight, guys. But everyone else out there, I hope you've had a wonderful time. If you're in lockdown, keep safe. If you're not, mate, enjoy it. And everyone else out there, have a wonderful night. Peter, thank you very, very much, mate.
Thank you. It's been fun. Yeah.
Awesome, mate. Thank you again, guys. All the best, guys. Cheers. Talk soon, everyone.
Hey, Dave. Hope you're doing well.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous.
My name is Lisa Downs.
And today, I'm going to be Dave.
Just for you.